So, Ethan Quinn, a big welcome to Control the Controllables. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be on. Always love talking to tennis folks, so I'm just excited for it.
Well, thank you for coming on. And one of the most exciting players on the tour right now, and I'm sure lots of people are ready to get to know you a little bit better. It's been a pleasure meeting you the last couple of weeks here in Madrid and also in Barcelona last week. And obviously, you've moved on from Madrid. You're now in Portugal and Estoril, and I notice you haven't played this week. You're in Portugal, but your name's come out of the draw. So what's happened there?
Yeah, sometimes, fortunately, I've been playing a lot of matches over in Europe so far. I've played seven matches total, qualifying into both Barcelona and Madrid. Obviously, playing against Carlos and Mensik, some of the top players in the world. So I had to make a decision on if I was going to play this week or not. I felt like for myself, I wasn't ready to go and be able to compete 100%, and so I felt like it wasn't worth going on court and possibly not being ready or hurting myself for the upcoming tournaments. Rome, French Open, Wimbledon, they're all within the next, month and a half, 2 months. So to be risking myself to not play those events for a challenger, even though I know it's a big tournament, being a 175, I felt like it just wasn't really worth it to risk
Yeah.
my health. And so, we decided to not play this week, but we still are finding ways to make sure I'm getting better, making sure I'm doing all my stuff with the physios, making sure I'm working out, lifting. It's almost like a training block type of week, which is really nice to have. Sometimes when you're in Europe, the trip can get really long. So actually having a week off kind of where I can kind of mentally not be so engaged on playing a tournament or playing a match. It's been kind of nice. Like we've been, waking up a little bit later. We've been going out, getting coffee, having a little bit later practices, but still the intensity on court is all about progress and getting better and development. Whereas sometimes when you're in tournament mode, you kind of try and focus on just like the little things to get better and make sure the next match, you're playing at your highest level. So it's honestly kind of nice having just a little bit of a mental break from competing. And so then I think it'll actually allow me later on this clay court swing to be actually fully engaged, a little bit more engaged, because it's not like I'm over complicating things with a ton of matches or a ton of tournaments. I'm actually able to focus on just a few tournaments, just a few matches, just the ones that are going on right in front of me, rather than, being blinded by the thought. I remember in college, a lot of times it was like, I can always, like, there's always another match. Whereas this time I can actually kind of focus and just like, all right, the next tournament right here, let me just give myself the best chance to play at my highest level for Rome.
Spoken with such maturity. It says in front of me here you're 21 years old, but you must have a great team around you. And just hearing that, I completely echo that. The players I'm working with, I always try and almost look almost 12 weeks ahead, and
Yeah.
start building back from there, because before you know it, and I've seen it with players, before you know it, you've qualified at French Open and you're in the first or second round main draw, and your legs go, your freshness is
Yeah.
gone, or
Yeah.
everything's completely gone. And to be able to kind of look across that, so it's a brilliant message to for people to hear. Now, the one thing I do want to pick up on, because you said it yourself, you said about being over in Europe, and American players in Europe, we don't have places open 24/7.
Yeah.
The convenience. I've got a tennis academy in Spain, and I know this. Whenever we have Americans come over, they just can't get their head around.
Yeah.
I can't have pizza at 1 o'clock in the morning when I want pizza at 1 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning. Like, what is going on? Never mind not having pizza at 1 o'clock in the morning. You were in Portugal. I was in Madrid, and the grid went. The electricity went off. I was on the practice court with the various players I work with for like between 11 and I did 5 hours at back to
Yeah.
back, and I walked off, and I was like, it was like Armageddon in
Yeah.
in Madrid, and like people are sitting around with candles and
Yeah.
drinking
Yeah.
wine and reading books and or doing all these things. How was it in Portugal? You had a similar experience? I believe the electricity was off as well.
Yeah, the electricity was off. Fortunately, it didn't happen until roughly like 10:30, 11 o'clock, kind of right as we were heading over to the courts. In the morning, it was perfectly fine. I had breakfast. I went, found a coffee spot. Everything was great. Went to the site, and kind of right as we got to the site, that's when I actually realized like what was kind of going on. I arrived at the site, was going down to the gym, and it was pitch black. The physio room, pitch black. They didn't even have candles on site ready to go. So everything was just dark. You had to kind of feel your way through. It being my first time going to the site, it was really
Wow.
tough. I didn't know where anything was, and now you make it pitch black. And so I'm like, man, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, opening random doors, hoping I can figure out where the locker room is. But yeah, it was honestly, it was strange, on site at the tournament. They started matches in the afternoon. Just because there wasn't electronic line calling, so they were able to play matches. But they had to get the fans home. They actually told fans to leave the courts and leave the facility. That way they could get home safely. All the stoplights, everything had kind of stopped working. Trains had stopped working. Gas stations weren't available. The cars at the site were electronic vehicles. So they were really trying to ration the amount of like electricity they're actually using with taking players to and from hotels. I know the other hotel was no running water, no electricity. It was kind of just strange. Every player in the tournament went to my hotel. We fortunately had a generator, and they were able to provide some food. They're just like these little ham sandwiches, but a lot of guys had walked down to like the little city of Cascais, and it was bare. There was people were drinking wine and people were drinking beer, but when you're looking for food, which especially knowing that had the chance of playing tomorrow, a lot of guys were going to play the next day. They're looking for food, not to get hammered on beer and wine. So it was strange. It was honest, but at the same time, it was kind of refreshing too. I knew I couldn't
Was.
check my phone. I couldn't do anything on my phone. I read my book a lot. I was able to sit outside and just kind of enjoy the weather. I mean, it's beautiful here. Fortunately, our hotel's right on the water, so we're able to just kind of watch the waves and just watch people surfing. And a lot of people are just sitting out, just enjoying the weather as well. But yeah, it was weird. For me not having food. I kind of started getting a little stressed out. I was getting a little hungry. Once we were able to, lights came back on, service came back, everything was back to normal. And, it was honestly kind of nice having that just like little 12-hour period of just nothing.
And you know what hit me in Madrid was because actually I found this the last few years traveling. Almost the bigger the tournament, the less people talk to each other.
Yes.
And I don't like it, if I'm honest. There's not this fellowship. It doesn't feel like it. Whereas challenger level, futures, juniors, yeah, certainly, you feel like there's a bit more camaraderie. There's a bit more.
Absolutely.
We're in this together. Everyone's in the same hotel. In Madrid, there's probably 8 hotels.
Yeah.
It's very different. But all of a sudden, conversations were happening. Community was happening.
Yeah.
Within our team, we were playing a board game, and
Yeah.
we had a hysterical time. Like we
Yeah. Yeah.
were, it was like a kind of bit of a Pictionary, but it was actually an adult one. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll not say what we were drawing, but you drawing all sorts of things, and it was hysterical. But we never did it, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
there was a moment, and I'll never forget this moment. There's like 7 of us around a table, and we're wetting ourselves. This flying, the banter's flying,
Yeah.
and then 4 people went, "I've got a message coming through."
Yeah.
And I looked up, and 30 seconds later, it was
Boom.
like
Nothing.
we've got
Everyone.
the community's gone again.
Yeah.
Everyone's just locked into digital world, and maybe we just sometimes need these little messages from time to time just to reset us. So
Absolutely.
I think that was a lovely moment. And then in the hotel I'm in Madrid, we were all looking for a supermarket, and everyone was walking past, and lots of conversations. And yeah, I think we had Ceballos, the doubles player, he's like directing people quickly. It closes at 9:30, and
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
as we were walking back about 9:50, the lights came on because all the lights
Yeah.
were off, electricity was
Yeah.
off, and everyone's out the windows and
Yeah.
swinging
Cheering. Yeah. Going
towels,
nuts.
and
Yeah.
and it was lovely to see that human side of the game a little bit as well. So
Exactly. Exactly.
we'll all remember this time, Madrid 2025 and Estoril 2025. But just to take you on to the clay bit, because that's where I want to jump in actually, because I've looked into it and I'm like, Americans on red clay, because your results have hit me the last few weeks. I've been following your name for a while. I thought I was really interested to see how you were doing on the clay, and you've obviously had a very good red clay court season. As
Yeah.
well as you win over Jordan Thompson in Houston as well. And then I started thinking, Americans, you don't often get much on the clay, like that happens. And I think it's and then I looked into it a bit more. So I'm going to throw a couple of stats at you. So since 1990, long time ago, men's American tennis players have won 51,000 events. Only 4 are on clay courts. I believe 46 on hard. Since 2002, 13 Masters titles. only one on clay, but that was in 2002. It was Andre Agassi in Rome. So
Yeah.
there hasn't 23 years no Americans won a Masters on a clay court, whereas there's been 13. Yes, there's been the odd result, but there hasn't been many. I think Fritz is the only one that's made quarterfinals in 3 events or more out of the Americans. I know Tommy Paul made semi-finals in Rome last year, but
Yeah.
but before that it was John Isner back in 2017. A lot of good tennis players. You're currently sitting, you're number 15 in America, but you're 119 in the world. You know, US tennis men are doing good things. Why not so much on clay? And why do you think maybe your game seems to be suiting the clay when for many years it hasn't suited American men?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think a lot of it is the mental aspect. You hear a lot of the times, like when I'm just in the locker room talking to some of the older Americans, they don't really seem, excited to go to Europe. They don't
Mm-hmm.
seem excited to go onto the clay. And I think it's just as you start talking it into existence, you finish Miami and you're about to start the clay court season. A lot of guys are already dreading going overseas, going over to Europe for an extended period of time. A lot of guys, they all start in Houston and they skip Monte Carlo. And Houston I love the event. It's an amazing event. It's hard to say no to, I know, for a lot of players when it comes to appearance fees. It's close to home. It's America. So obviously a lot of US players are going to want to play there. But the entire way you play points and the way the game is played there is entirely different, in my opinion, than playing it in Europe. The court is just
Yeah.
extremely different than the European red clay. So I think some of it starts there, like the willingness to not go over early and play in Monte Carlo. I think there's a lot to be said with that, being comfortable playing in the Houston courts rather than playing on the real stuff and going over early. And like I was saying, with the mental aspect, not being excited to come over to the red clay, not being excited to be in Europe, it's a lot different of a lifestyle being in Europe versus being in the US. It's just, you're having to go to dinner a lot later. Maybe things are just a little bit different. You're not able to, transportation's a little bit slower because, it's just, there's traffic. The roads aren't maybe not as easy to get to and from events. There's a lot of different things that kind of come
Yep.
into it. But a lot of it, I think, is just the mental aspect. You talk to them and they're like, oh, Europe, like, I don't want to go to Europe. Like, oh, it's going to suck. Like, the clay's going to suck. And, I think the most important thing that my team has done already is right away we said, we're going to love the clay. Like, that was the first thing I said after Miami is like, man, I'm so excited about getting on the red clay and going overseas. I look forward to playing in these big events. There's a lot of history at a lot of these events. The cities are amazing. Like me, myself, like I love to go and explore and, look at different places. We went to a museum, the Picasso Museum in Barcelona, went and saw some cathedrals there. In Madrid, I literally walked around the city for like 5 hours in the center of downtown, just finding ways to enjoy what I'm doing, especially being 21 years old. I'm very appreciative of being able to go overseas, play these massive events. A lot of my friends from high school and stuff, they're in college and wherever they might be, Athens, Georgia, or Notre Dame or UCSB or whatever it might be. And so it's like I'm very lucky to be doing what I'm doing and getting to travel the world at 21 years old. So I think a lot of it's just the mental aspect. Right away my team was like, man, let's go make a tear. Let's be the American that's gonna make some damage. People are gonna be talking about it. And fortunately, I think that's what we've done so far. Is a lot of people are kind of scared of seeing me on the clay. And a lot of times you see an American on clay and they're like, man, this is a great draw. This is exciting. And so far, I think a lot of players have seen my results. It's funny. I was walking down the hall one day in Madrid and Gael Monfils was in front of me and he was walking, he looked back and he kept walking and then he stopped and was like, hey man, like, great job, like, great results, like, hell of a job. And I was like, wow, like, that's I had never talked to him and he knew who I
Nice.
was. So it's kind of cool seeing how your name kind of travels as your results get better and better. Especially on the clay, I think there's a lot more chatter with it, knowing that there is such I'm not going to say bad history, but just not great results when it comes to the clay courts. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've come into the clay court season with is just being mentally ready to go, mentally have wars, figuring that, all right, playing on the red clay is going to get me better on the hard court because there's so many lessons that you can learn. I felt like last year when I played on the green clay, 3 challengers in Florida and Georgia, and I felt like I maybe didn't get better. But right as I stopped or started coming over and playing on the red clay, I played Geneva, I played 275s on red clay in Portugal and Italy. I feel like I actually made a huge jump in my level of tennis. Maybe I didn't get the results like I wanted to last year, but I actually made a huge development jump just by being willing to come and play on the red clay. And I think that's the most important thing with what's going on so far this season on the red dirt is just I'm willing to go out there and wanting to be successful. And I'm not dreading anything about being over here. I'm excited about it. My girlfriend's fortunately gonna be able to come to Rome, so it'll make it just a little bit like I'm closer to home. My mom's coming to Rome as well, so it's making it like it's like I'm back in the U.S., but we're in such an amazing city in Rome. Food is great, coffee's great. Now I have family there, and it's going to be a really exciting time with what's coming up.
Believable answer, Ethan. For me, you've just described the secret to life. Basically, you have. It's like if we all embrace and enjoy all the situations to the best of our ability with gratitude, we'll all live a better life, right?
100%.
And it's and I couldn't agree more with you on that. Actually, yeah, I think even we saw, and I love Jess Pegula, so this is not a dig at Jess Pegula because she's amazing, but Jess, I know, has gone back to America. It kind of it falls in that little window, that Madrid to Rome window. It gives you enough days where your mind starts thinking, well, actually, maybe I could get a few days back there before.
Yeah.
And I think it probably tests people. And I think the level of tennis you guys are playing, the margins are small, right? They're thin.
Yeah.
And if you take your eye off the ball a little bit. Now, what are the big differences? This is, I think, episode 253 or something of Control the Controllables. We had lots of conversations. And I had a Spanish coach came on, quite a famous Spanish coach, used to work with Rafael Nadal many years ago. And he said, clay court is the best assistant coach you will ever have. It's teaching you all the time. For you, who probably hasn't had that much experience on a red European clay court, what is the big difference? What is the thing that you feel develops in your game when you spend a lot of time on it? And I suppose the second part of that, to take you back to what you said earlier, playing 7 matches on the clay, how much more does that take out of you physically as well?
Yeah, I mean, so the first part of that, I'd say that the thing you learn most about playing on the red clay, and my coach says it all the time, is you have to be willing to suffer. When you get on a red clay court, you have to know that you're not going to get any free points, even if unless you're Riley or obviously or Isner, you're not going to get any free service points. Like obviously you might get the occasional one, but for the most part, you're having to expect a first ball. And even if you get a first ball, it's not going to be easy to, hit a winner or be able to get a free unforced error. You're going to have to actually work the points, and you have to hit multiple shots, or you have to come up with something great in order to win the point. So being willing to suffer and being physical, I think that's the thing that you have to be willing to do when you come on the red clay. If you're going to try and, out hit guys, you're going to try and play flat, you're going to try and beat guys with power, then you're just going to get chopped. And that's the first thing I learned when I played Mutet in Barcelona was, the first set I'm trying to out hit him, and he's, pushing me back, and I'm trying to just like nuke the ball through the court, and then he'd find an easy drop shot because the ball just slows down so much. And, I was really uncomfortable with what he was doing because, I was putting myself in a bad position. But once I was locked down, I was just suffering, honestly, every point in, point out, chasing balls down, building the points, figuring out how I could get to the net, learning, like playing tennis. Honestly, that's what it is. You have to play tennis in order to win the points. You can't just get any free shots. So I think that's the thing that you have to be, that's the thing that clay does for you, is you have to be willing to suffer. But like you were saying, what does it do to your body? It crushes it at the same time. My coach growing up, Brad Stein, he'd always say that, the French Open is the hardest one to win of all the slams, just because the physicality that's required. You having to play such long points, even if it's a straight sets match, you're out there for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. Whereas maybe if you're playing in Wimbledon and you win in straight sets, it could be like a 3-3-3 in like an hour and 45. It's just the tennis is a lot different. It's serving first ball, on the grass, where obviously it requires a lot more, you have to be really precise with what you're doing. The clay is like you have to be really willing to suffer and just dig balls out for hours, honestly. And so you feel it right away physically. You walk off court and you know that if you don't do the proper things for recovery, whether it's ice bath or physio or, stretch down, that you're going to be feeling it the next day. And then, if you don't do it for a few days in a row, then your body's just it's going to break down on you. And that's the first thing that I figured out is, playing 4 matches in a week. I played Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, off day Thursday, played Friday in Madrid. And I came off the court and I was like just spent. My body was just, I played a 7-6 in the third match against Montero, and that was just it was such a physical match. I mean, Montero hits the absolute piss out of every ball. And, it was a really, really tough match, and it was a long one. So the clay is just a different type of beast when it comes to it.
Well, looking at the results the last couple of weeks, and Barcelona was like playing on a sandpit.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was slow. It was slow.
Especially that center court. It was
Yeah.
it was thick clay. To Mute on a clay court, like 7-5 in the third. Borna Choric, who's got some serious clay under his belt, to be a set down to win 3 in the third. And then the draw comes out and you're playing Carlos Alcaraz, you've earned the right into the main draw. Take me to that moment when you see the draw, you're playing Carlos Alcaraz, Spanish Carlos Alcaraz in Barcelona doing what he does, and is kind of taking the mantle from Rafael Nadal on Pista Rafael Nadal as well. How was that experience from kind of start to finish, from knowing you were going to play against him?
Yeah, I mean, it was surreal. When the draw came out, my coach Brian, he had texted me and he was just like, "Hey, you play Carlos?" And I was like, "Oh, no way! Like that's funny. I was just talking about but who do I play?" And he's like, "No, dude, like you play Carlos." And I was just like, "Oh wow, like that's awesome." Like first thing he said is like, "Man, you earned this match. Like you didn't get a wild card. Like you didn't just like main draw. Like you had to win 2 tough matches in order to get this." And I was like, "You're right." I went into the match just like smile on my face. What's not to be excited about when you walk on that court. People are clapping for you when you walk on, and then they announce Carlos's name and the entire crowd just erupts. They're acting as if it was, the final of the French Open. Yep. And it was a first round match, and it was just like I was smiling the whole way through, just coin flip, everything, just seeing his presence. He walks on the court and he just has a little different kind of swag to him. The crowd, everyone's like, you can feel their eyes kind of watching you. And, it was an amazing experience. The first game of the match was like a 20-point game. Saved a few break points, had a few game points that he saved. And that right away, once I was able to get a hold, I was like, all right, like now it starts. Like, all right, like this is ready to go. And, I got kind of bagged in that first set. I lost it 6-2, but in reality it was, I had game points in a few of the games. I had break points on his service game twice, I want to say. Had game points on my serve a few times as well. I just wasn't able to convert. But it was just the entire experience. I was so happy to be on there. I was learning from watching, him move around the court the way he played. I'd walk over to my towel box and look at my coach and be like, dude, how did he hit that? Or like, man, this is like, he's doing this. Like that, I need to be able to counter it doing that. So it's like in the match, I was able to learn so much just by playing him. And, that's why we decided to come over here is like, a lot of people, they'd be like, shoot, like I'm playing Carlos, like I have no chance. But, I kind of stepped on the court and I was thinking, man, like I have a chance to, learn from this match. I have a chance to beat him. Like if I'm stepping on the court and think that I'm going to lose the match, why am I stepping on court? I went out there and thought that, I could beat him for sure. Like I have confidence, I've won 2 matches here. He's coming from Monte Carlo. Maybe he's a little bit tired. And, I played my game and it was working. I had opportunity. I wasn't able to convert my set point that I had in the second, but it was the whole experience it was unbelievable. And I stepped off court and the first messages that I read were, man, you can play with anyone on any surface. And I was just like, you're absolutely right. Like the fact that I was able to compete with Carlos, I felt like I wasn't getting bullied the entire match. I was able to hold my own ground and I was actually able to pressure him a little bit. It was something I'm really proud of, being able to walk off court with a smile on my face and think that not only like I didn't just lose the match, but I actually got better and that I have a opportunity later in this season, maybe like, all right, now I can play him again and I can know that I'm going to beat him. Like I have a chance to beat him. And I think that's really important for players is if you're going to step on court, you have to believe that you're going to win the match. And I think that's what I continuously am able to learn playing these top players. I played Tommy, I played Mensik, I played Carlos. Like obviously guys that are all top in the world. And, you know, I've been able to go deep with them or had opportunities to get sets. And it's just amazing kind of seeing how just by getting the chance, you know, being a little uncomfortable, going and doing things that you wouldn't necessarily see other players do, it's able to actually help you long term.
It's a bit of a coach's question, but the set point that you had, are you happy with your commitment to that point? What happened in that set point?
I'm happy with what I was trying to do.
Yeah,
I'm not happy with my execution, but I'm very happy with, you know, I made a first serve on your set point. That's the first step. You got to make a
yeah,
first serve. And, you know, I hit a great first serve, was able to go big out wide to his backhand. You know, I made the first serve and I was able to get the first ball that I wanted. You know, I got a short, not a short ball, but a mid-court forehand. And, you know, I just didn't do enough with it. But, you know, a lot of the times my coaches are telling me, like, all right, man, you got to get to the net. Like, big situations, you're very comfortable with winning points at the net. You know, guys, make them come up with something great. And, you know, I didn't hit the approach quite as well as I would have liked, but I was doing it on my terms. He came up with something pretty darn good. And, you know, I'd rather lose the point doing that than playing passively and letting him just rope a forehand.
absolutely.
And, you know, I played it on my terms, and I'm really happy with that.
Good, because those, I always think those are the moments, right? You know, and for a 21-year-old as well, who is putting himself into these moments for the first time. I know you've had a successful career at whatever you've done, you know, and we'll get to that in a bit. But as a freshman winning NCAAs, and you know, you've clearly got the pedigree in the sport. However, but that's another step up, right? Playing Carlos Alcaraz in Spain
Yeah,
on a clay court in a tournament he's won at least once, but probably multiple times, you know, and having that set point, how you react in that moment and being able to commit to your identity at that time is the real strength of where you are at as a tennis player, in my opinion. You know,
100%.
so that's, I guess, where that question comes from. And then you go from Madrid, from Barcelona, playing slow, sinking sand, almost clay court tennis, to Madrid. And this is what a lot of people don't realize with clay court tennis. It can change, right? Pretty
Yeah,
dramatically from tournament to tournament, from day to day, from times in the day as well. You know, the types of balls you use, you know, whether it's hot, whether it's cloudy, whether it's under lights.
yeah,
And Madrid, the ball flies, right?
yeah.
It's a very it's clay court, but it's a different proposition. You don't have a whole lot of time, I would imagine, to get used to it. You played Billy Harris first round, who I used to coach actually, and I love Billy, but you're probably not a bad draw on a clay court to play. Billy Harris, and then obviously Montero, who's a clay courter, Lajovic, who's been brought up on clay, and you managed to get those three matches, and then you played the most, for some reason, the most underwhelming of tennis players in terms of what the media talk about,
Yeah.
which is completely crazy when he's about 12 years old and he's winning Masters 1000 events. But tell us about that experience in Madrid that then ended with you playing against Mensik in the second round main
Yeah,
draw.
second round. Yeah, you know, it's like you were saying, everything is so different day to day. You know, I played Billy on an indoor stadium at night, you know, 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. o'clock was our start time. And that court was completely different than when I played Lajovic or Mensik, you know. It was night match indoors, and then when I played those guys, it was noon, it was hot, it was outdoors, no stadium, no shade, no cover, and the court was just lightning fast. And so everything was so much different, and being able to adjust is maybe the biggest thing when it comes to tennis. Being a professional tennis player, you know, my coach, he always tells me when we first get to someone, is just like, he's like, forget about the feels. Like, you're gonna feel bad most likely because it's so different week to
Good
week.
advice. Yeah.
So don't forget about the feels. Just make sure that you know, all right, is the loop on my forehand big? Am I setting my feet properly? Am I going up aggressively at my serve? Whatever the cues might be. He's like, make sure that you're handling those things the right way. And if you're missing the ball by a little bit, all right, you're gonna figure it out by the next day or by the time match time comes. Like you're gonna figure it out. So don't worry about that. If you're missing your return in the net, all right, whatever. The next day you're gonna feel good. You know, you're gonna make a bunch of returns. We're gonna focus on that, and you're gonna be fine. But yeah, when I was playing Billy, it was tough. You know, playing indoors on a stadium, I felt like it was impossible to see behind the courts because there's like this bright blue light. I felt like it was impossible to see the balls, but mentally in the match, I was like, all right, if I'm having trouble seeing, he has to have trouble seeing. So I was just trying to dig one more ball. You know, slow courts made it a lot easier. You know, he wasn't able to hit his big serve, being able to hit his big forehand. So I was able to get through that one kind of comfortably. Obviously, there's never a comfortable win in pro tennis. There's always a little bit of adversity thrown in there, and he's a great player. And it's funny, actually, I was practicing with him last year in Francavilla de Mar, and now we're in Madrid. We go from a 75, we lost first round, and now we're both in Madrid playing a Masters 1000. So
A
it's
bit of
funny how
a bit of a side note on Billy. It's an incredible story. Like,
unbelievable
no,
story.
no, no,
He's
it's incredible.
One of my favorite stories that I've heard in tennis, and
It's
I have
amazing.
utmost respect for him and how he's able to compete week in, week out. It's unbelievable. I absolutely love him. I respect him so much. And then yeah, going into the Montero match, I knew he was an absolute dirt baller, and I was actually pleasantly surprised by how big he hit the ball. It's not often where I feel like, oh man, like my forehand's not quite as big, but he was absolutely tuning the ball. And the whole first set, I was kind of looking at my box and I was like, dude, like he's hitting the crap out of the ball. Like this is insane.
What happens there? Let me stop you there, because maybe you give me a bit of advice as a coach, because it can be quite a tough place, that box, as a coach at times,
Yeah,
like, and obviously you setting game plans, and you've got to be very conscious when you're setting game plans not to say things in such an absolute way. But as a player, you can I'll actually share a story on this very quickly, and this will hopefully explain what I'm talking about. I coached a guy, and he won't mind me sharing the story, Josh Ward Hibbert. And he was very good junior, did very well. And then he was starting to play futures. And we'd got a scouting report on the guy who was playing. The guy had quite a strong right hand on his backhand.
yeah,
And the scouting report was the guy's passes kind of line or straight, long cross. He can't roll. He struggles to roll. Josh liked to come forward, and I'm charting the match. I'm in
yeah,
Greece. And Josh has come to the net on the guy's backhand 28 times, and he's won 26 of them.
yeah,
It's like golden.
yeah,
When do you ever get a tactic that works that much? You just
yeah,
don't. It was like the most
yeah,
golden tactic you could ever have. And then he's a setup 4-3 serving breakpoint down, and he hits the worst chip slice backhand and runs to the net. And the guy rolls a backhand past him cross court for the first time in the match. And he turns around to me and he's like, yeah, really good information. Thanks for that. Really good information. Yeah, really good.
yeah,
And I'm like, dude, you've won 26 out of 28 points with that exact bit of information.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but it can be a kind of place, right? So in a situation like this, you're playing Montero, and you guys are maybe thinking he's a bit of a dirt ball. He's going to play up on the forehand. He's not going after it. And now he's absolutely getting after. How do you kind of navigate that, and deal with the emotion that tennis players do deal with,
yeah,
and then still stay connected with your team at the side without thinking, guys, you're giving me the wrong information here?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I'm not gonna say that like my coach. He didn't tell me that Montero like was passive on his forehand. He didn't tell me that he was like a full dirt baller and just played it
Yeah,
heavy. Like he told me he hits it big, but there's still the shock factor. Like
yeah,
you can tell me he hits it big, and I'm sure plenty of coaches tell guys like, hey, Ethan Quinn hits his forehand big, and then they step on court and they're like, shit, that's big.
yeah,
You can only prepare so much by hearing a guy that hits the ball big. But for myself, honestly, we were like, I was, in this place, lost the first set. He's serving huge, hitting his forehand huge, and I was getting broken, but it wasn't like off of him, absolutely beating me with it. It was just me making stupid errors. So the first thing I said to myself for the start of that second set, and honestly, what my coaches said is like, all right, just control what you can control. Control your serve. Make your first serves. Handle business on your serves. And if you get a look on break points, then you get a look on break points. But men's tennis is being able to hold your serve. And from that point on, I only got broken one more time, and that's actually when I was serving for the match. I was serving for the match at 5-4 in the third, and that's the last time. That was when I got broken. So from start of the second set through the entire match, I only got broken at 5-4 serving for the match from that point on. So I think that's the most important part, is when your coaches are able to say something, I have to be really present and able to
yeah,
listen to what they're saying and being able to apply it. Being coachable is very important. And sometimes my coaches actually get mad at me for being too coachable. And for example, a few years back, I remember I was playing Rinky Hijikata, and I was playing every forehand inside out from, C and D. And my coach was like, hey, like pull one inside in. And then the very first ball I get to pull inside in, I pull it inside in and I bury it into the bottom of the net. And I look at it, I was like, probably not the right one to pull. And they're like, probably not. But, that's just a little example. Is like,
Yeah.
sometimes they tell me things, you're like, here, do this. And I'm like, all right. And I do it right away. And they're like, well, shit, like I didn't mean to do it like right now, like wait for the right ball. So, there's certain times where
Yeah.
sometimes I'm not going to say I'm a little bit too coachable, but there's moments where stuff like that happens where, I try to implement it right away and sometimes it's just not the right time.
Yeah. And
But,
that's what tennis is, right? Like I and the nuances. It's about the nuances, and it's like I remember watching Carlos. I've seen him a lot. I saw him when he was 13, because I live in Spain, but I remember watching him play. Well, I saw him then at 16 at 25 Ks, but I then saw him play Davis Cup, or maybe it was an ATP event in Marbella when he was like 17, 18.
mhm,
And he hit the ball like 3 times faster than whoever he was playing, but he lost.
yeah,
And you could see Juan Carlos was in the corner, like tearing his hair out, like
yeah,
with his decision making,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it was like, and even now, actually, when he's won 4 Grand Slams, sometimes he's got
yeah,
questionable decision making, but like that nuance, as you get the nuances of when to do the different things and the patterns and when to pull the trigger and when not to, and that's what, when the players go up the rankings, but they have to have
100%.
the level, of
Yes,
course, and
yes.
the ball speed and the ability to do that as well.
Yep, absolutely. It's funny you say that because I mean, going through college, my forehand was able to win me a lot of matches. There wasn't a lot
Yeah.
of matches I went into the court and the guy was going to beat me with pace. Almost every match I played in college, I knew that, all right, I'm going to be able to hit him off the court. And so a lot of the time it didn't even have to come down to decision making. I was able to make poor decisions
Yeah.
knowing that, all right, I'm probably going to hit a winner here, or he's going to miss the ball, or give me an easier ball to make, another decision that's easy. And once I started playing pro tennis, the first thing my coaches were saying was like, dude, we need some structure. We need you to play tennis. We need you to be able
Yeah.
to, know the patterns, know when to hit shots, know when not to hit shots, be disciplined with everything, win the neutral rallies, win the neutral plus, whatever it might be. And once I started kind of understanding that and accepting that, it took a lot for me to be able to kind of like embrace that mentality. I felt like a lot of it was my coaches were telling me and I knew it was the right thing, but I just didn't like, I couldn't process it and couldn't implement it into my tennis because I'd been building bad habits through
Did you
college
feel
because
did you
no, I wasn't gonna. I didn't feel restricted. I
yeah.
just felt like it felt like I was having to play a whole different sport. It was almost like my mind was having to like it was churning just so much because I was having to, each ball I was having to almost rewire the way that I would like attack that ball.
Yeah.
There'd be some shots where in college I was able to, go out for a running forehand and just, hit it huge down the line and, take a bunch of risk, whatever. And I was able to win the point. Whereas in pro tennis, I'd do the exact same shot and then I'd be running dead stretch to my backhand. And that's not somewhere where I want to be. And, I'd do it over and over and over again in pro tennis and it just would hurt me constantly having to run, having to do all this type of stuff that I don't really want to be doing. I'm taking
Yeah.
unnecessary risk. And so, I didn't feel restricted. I just felt like I was really like struggling with actually learning tennis. I was really having to sit down and actually learn the sport a lot more and the intricacies that tennis requires. The pro tennis has so many different little things that if you're able to win those rallies, win the 1%, win the neutral plus, it's you're able to elevate so quickly. And it was just hard for me to kind of understand that and embrace it because I hadn't been doing it at all through college. I was able to just win doing the wrong things.
Really good, really good. And when you transitioned from college, how was that transition? My understanding is you lost quite a few matches to start.
It
It
was
was
it was in the moment it felt horrible.
yeah.
I felt like it was the worst decision of my life. Like I was like, man, this is awful. Like I don't like this at all. I don't enjoy it. Like there's not a single thing about pro tennis that I'm enjoying. Losing sucks. It's not fun to lose. And when I'm looking back and you see like, all right, my friends are going out to bars or they're going to frat parties or they're, playing conference matches in the SEC and whatever it is, like, or my girlfriend, she had some sort of event that I wasn't able to attend. It was really difficult. It's I'm on the road. I'm losing matches. I'm doing the loser's lift, whatever it is, on the next day after a match, and there's just like regretting what I'm doing, and it was really difficult doing that. But now looking back, I was like, man, if I didn't go through like those really, really tough challenges and where I was mentally, now I feel like it's a lot easier. Where if I get to top 100 and I have to deal with the like other sets of challenges, I'm going to be a lot stronger knowing that I can make it through it. Whereas if I had it exploded immediately, maybe got to top 50 and then plateaued right there and maybe had, a 4 month losing streak or whatever it is, 2 month losing streak, then I could have, been set off the rails just because I hadn't gone through any sort of adversity, in college and even in juniors. Honestly, I wrote down, my goals for the start of the year every January. And, basically every single year I wrote down those goals. I had a check mark next to every single one of them by December. I had accomplished all these goals. And then when I played pro tennis, I did the exact same thing, thinking that, oh, I write it down, it's going to happen. That first year I wrote it down, and man, I maybe accomplished one of those goals. And it was really, really, really tough mentally to write down those goals and, look at them every single, 3 months or whatever, quarterly, and not have another one to check off. I'd only be able to check one off, and that was the first quarter. I checked one goal off, and then I had another 9 months of just like sitting and staring at goals that weren't getting accomplished, and actually getting even further away from them, honestly. That's what it felt like. And so it was a really, really tough transition. But now I'm just, happy and thankful that I was able to go through those difficulties.
Word that's jumped to my mind throughout this conversation, Ethan, is belief. You give off a humble belief, but you give off. I speak to a lot of people in the world of tennis. I'm a tennis enthusiast. I am a tennis coach. I used to play. This has been my life for many, many years. And belief is something that I see that it all starts from with so many people, and that seems to come through. And there's a couple of bits I want to look at it with you. And I guess my first question, before I take you back a little bit to your childhood or the kind of the starting point of your tennis, when you were in that moment of challenge, of difficulty, your first year on the tour, you've made the decision to leave college after 1 year, after winning the NCAAs, like, you're a big deal, right? I don't know if there's been many freshmen that have won NCAAs in their first year. Did you lose belief? Now, you might have lost some confidence, because for me, confidence is a bit more on the surface. But would you say during that year that you lost belief, or did that belief stay unwavering during that moment?
I felt like the belief was still there. I just felt like I couldn't see the pathway that was going to be able to get me to where I wanted to be. I felt like I was like, man, I feel like I mentally approached the game. I feel like I felt like I was very professional. I wasn't going out and partying after a loss, or I wasn't going out and filling my body with shit food, or doing anything, or like losing motivation to go work out and get better. I was handling everything with the same intensity as if I am doing now. I just would step on court and I'd be working so hard, and I just didn't see the pathway for how I was going to do it. I'd work hard, and then I'd step off court, and I was like, just, man, was that enough? I just didn't see the pathway for how I could possibly get to where I wanted to be. And I knew that if I was going to get there, that I was going to continuously have to work hard, and that eventually I was going to be able to see it, because I had so much trust and so much belief in my team. I think that's what it came down to. Is I honestly had so much belief in the people that I was working with, that they were going to be able to help me get to where I wanted to be. That as long as I continuously stepped on court with the same mindset and the same motivation that I kind of, when I started with them, and that when I started my pro career, if I gave them everything I had, that they would be able to help me get to where I wanted to be. I think a lot of it honestly came down to when I actually added people to my team, such as a sports psychologist. My girlfriend, for, gosh, I'm trying to think, maybe for 6 months, she was telling me, she's like, I think you need to work with a sports psychologist. And, I felt like in my head, I didn't want to talk to someone about my problems, that I wanted to try and figure them out on my own, do everything myself, that Um, I talked to my coaches about what I was feeling and stuff like that, but they didn't really have the exact answers for me that I needed. Because I mean, obviously they're not sports psychologists, and so they've been around tennis plenty of years, but some questions that I had, I couldn't have them answered by them. And once I was able to add him to my team, his name's Darren McCain. And once I was able to add him to my team, I was able to, I don't know, just feel this like moment of just like a deep breath where I felt like there was a lot of relief that I was able to receive just from having 3 conversations with him. We quickly focused on how I could improve my routines when I was on court and when I was stressing out, from whether I was making bad decisions or whatever it was. We were able to create just this process that was going to allow me to play at my highest level, or at least be able to help me figure out a way to, not overwhelm myself when I wasn't playing great. A lot of the times you step on court, you think that you're going to play amazing, but, the reality is probably 99% of the matches you're going to play in the year are going to be not great. You're going to have to figure out how to win with maybe your C game. And I think once I was able to kind of start talking with him, and he was able to like almost reinsure my belief in myself, and
Okay.
he was able to really help me through just like the mental things that I was really kind of dealing with. There's sometimes like I wouldn't even talk to my mom about it. I'd be finishing practices and whatnot and going home, and I'd just be miserable because I'd be like, man, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Like, I'm so lonely doing what I'm doing. Sometimes I feel like I couldn't talk to like Tommy Paul either, just because I felt like what I was dealing with in the low rings of tennis wasn't even close to the same as what he was doing. He'd come back from semifinals of Australian Open, and I just lost first round of a Challenger 50. And then we're working out together, and it's like, man, I'm gonna just put on a brave face and show that I'm gonna work hard. But behind the scenes, it's just like, man, what the hell? Like, I don't know what's going on.
So you with Brad, because obviously Brad coaches Tommy as well, yeah. So
Mhm.
so you and Tommy have been training partners, sparring partners, and I would imagine friends as well, which is incredible, right? But I guess in those darker moments where you've got doubt, to be hanging out with someone who's top 10 in the world, and he's not a bad looking fella either, old Tommy. He's got a few things going in his favor. That could also send you another way, because I guess there's two things I'm picking up is like normalization of situations, which I think is massive for tennis players. And, hearing you say it, right, normalizing that actually I'm not going to play my best tennis. Andy Murray famously said it a couple of years ago in his 16-year career. He's genuinely happy on two performances.
Yeah.
16 years, like the sooner people realize that, and it's, that there's the normalization piece. But I also think comparison is the devil,
Oh, it's awful.
and comparison and expectation. And we're in this world where social media now as well, and everyone knows everyone's results, and it's a very toxic world in terms of that. I've even got it. I coach WTA doubles team, and I coach an ATP doubles team. The ATP doubles team, Mektic and Venus, they play quarterfinals tomorrow in Madrid. The girls, Dabrowski and Router, were number one seeds here in Madrid. They lost a really tight match, and like, it's like I'm looking at the girls they lost to. I felt it's a match they probably should win, but it was tight and doubles. And then I'm looking, and they've won their next couple of matches easy, and now they've got
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's like, and you. I'm 45 years old, and you try and stay away from those things, but
Yeah.
you do naturally have. It's the way the human brain works. So how did you deal with that comparison stuff that maybe was almost in front of your eyes with Tommy having his success? Did that take a little bit of working towards to
Yeah.
help you, and I guess getting to the point now where I'm sure it helps you a hell of a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it came down to talking with Darren, and he was able to kind of put it in perspective that basically every single player that is top 100 in the world, maybe with a few outliers, they've had to deal with, maybe losing challenger matches. They've had to, like, I know Tommy himself, he's probably come out and said it too, that he's lost, he was struggling. There was, he was coming up at the same time as Riley and Fritz and Foe, and
Yeah.
he was just a little bit of the straggler behind them, and he was constantly comparing himself with those guys. And so once Darren was able to kind of put it in perspective that other players have dealt with the same things that I've gone through, I was actually able to kind of talk about it a little bit more, and just ask questions and not feel scared to get a response. I think the most important thing is you can't be scared to ask guys questions and learn lessons. I remember talking to or texting with Isner and just asking him like, man, like how'd you do this, or what did you do when this was going on, like, did whatever it was. And I wasn't scared to start asking questions, and once I was able to kind of figure that out, I was able to relieve myself of comparing guys. I think the greatest thing for me this year to date so far was no longer being in the next gen category.
Hmm.
All of last year, I was focusing on, all right, how can I get into the next gen tournament? I'm at the end of the year, just because it is such a great payday and it's such a great event. I was looking at it like constantly, just like I'd have a result. I'd look, all right, where is this going to put me in the race? All right, I had a great week. I made finals of this challenger. And then, I quickly would take myself away from, oh, I just had a good result because I saw that 4 other guys that were next gen also had a great result. And then they actually jumped me. So it's like I wasn't even rewarding, like, I wasn't accepting that, I had a great result this week just because I saw another guy have a result. Once I was able to age out of that, honestly, it freed me up so much. I didn't talk about it a lot last year with my coaches at all, or even trainers, anyone, just that I was really struggling with the fact that I was looking at next gen so much. I was looking at it every single week, just seeing, guys move up the rankings and myself move down the next gen list. And I was like, man, if I win this tournament, I'll get to this number spot, and then I lose first round, and it's just like, fuck, like I can't believe I didn't win this tournament. And so it was a toxic process, just looking through all of that. And right away, when I remember when I finally wasn't able to make the tournament, I told everyone on my team, I was just like, I actually like, I'm very thankful that I didn't make like, now I'm so excited about this next year coming up,
Mm.
because I'm not thinking about, all right, the race or anything like that. I'm like, all right, now I can really focus on just like getting better and developing, because I feel like I've put a timeline on myself on like, all right, like if I don't win these tournaments by this date, then I'm really not going to have a chance. And then I just put so much pressure on every single tournament that, at the end of the season last year, when I knew that I couldn't even make the next gen tournament, I ended up winning my first challenger. It's funny. It's like I finally took off these expectations of myself and finally realized that, all right, I don't have to play for playing this tournament. Like I can just play each match as it comes. And, it was probably the best thing that's happened to me, in my tennis career, is finally accepting that I couldn't make the next gen tournament. And since then, it's like I had an unbelievable preseason. Winning your last tournament of the year is always a great feeling. Being able to end the year with a W and winning my first challenger, it was great. I felt like I was able to go into preseason thinking that, man, all the hard work that I've been doing this year, it's paying off. So let me push myself as hard as I can this preseason, and I'll be able to see more results like that. And then I ended up starting the year with the finals of a 125 in Canberra after qualifying in, and I felt like I was in a great spot physically after 7 matches consecutively, because I knew I'd put the work in the preseason. So it's funny how all that type of stuff works once you're finally able to just, not put a timeline, not compare yourself, not expect things, just focus on the match at hand and just getting better.
Inject that into your veins, all tennis players.
Yeah.
And it's look, it's I thank you so much for sharing that, because so many people wouldn't share that, but everyone's done it.
100%.
And the most famous one for me of that is 2012 Andy Murray. And boy, you would have been a young boy then. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But oh my God, that's scary. That feels like it was yesterday. But 2012 Andy Murray cried in front of the world.
Yeah.
And the reason Andy Murray cried in front of the world, and I've asked him about this on the podcast as well. So if you haven't listened to episode 200, Sir Andy Murray, then you should. And the reason he was crying was because he was going through the process of acceptance that he might never win a Grand Slam. And he basically lived his whole career thinking he has to. I'm Andy Murray. Everyone's told me I have to. I'm the big three. I need to do this. I need to. And once he got rid of that monkey, and he accepted rather than expected, which is just a massive thing for us in life, right? But certainly for tennis players. 4 weeks later, he won the Olympics.
Yeah.
4 more weeks later after that, he won the US Open. 12 months after that, he then won his first Wimbledon.
Yeah.
And if you ever want to know the power of the mind and the power of acceptance over expectancy. Never has a greater message been sent. Yet it's not easy, right? It's not easy
Yeah.
to do, and you need help. And you need help, just like
100%.
if you want to move better or you want to be stronger, you're going to go and get yourself a fitness coach, and you're going to put the work, and not just the fitness coach. You're going to have a program prescribed that you're then going to attack and do to the best of your ability every day to make an impact. And it almost blows my mind in some ways that we think we don't need to do that with our minds, and
100%. 100%.
exactly the same. So thank you for sharing that. Ethan, I promise you I wouldn't keep you for much longer than an hour. I would love to jump into loads of things because I think I think you're a delightful young man. And two, I think you have wisdom beyond your years. I really do. It's like I've been blown away with a lot of your answers, your insights. You absolutely strike me as someone, before we even talk about hitting a tennis ball, as in the right headspace to go on and continue having a great 2025. And I wish you absolutely all the best with that. We do have a tradition where we have a quick fire round at Control the Controllables. Okay. I also appreciate the Control the Controllables shout out earlier. I didn't disturb you when you were saying it, but your coach is shouting at you, Control the Controllables, so it makes a good podcast. So that is our first question in the quick fire round. What does Control the Controllables mean to you?
I'd say that it means, handling the things that are, that's such a basic answer. I was going to say the things that are within my control, but the things that are within my control are the things that I'm thinking, the ways that I'm feeling, the ways that I'm approaching things. I can't control how Thiago Monteiro is going to hit his forehand, but I can control the intensity that I provide, the way that I approach the service line, the way that I'm thinking about the next point or how I lost the last point. I think that's how I think of Control the Controllables.
In your eyes, what has been the biggest and most important victory in your career so far?
Biggest victory in my career.
Or most important?
Man, the most important one. I think I'm going to probably say, well, okay, can I give you two? Is that all right? Can I give you two?
Absolutely.
I'd say the biggest one that I had in college was when I played Stefan Dostanic. And he was at USC at the time, and at that point I had gone on like a 10-match losing streak. And then I ended up going on like I think an 18 or 19 match winning streak in college after I won that match, and part of that was NCAA's actually as well. And then professionally, I'd say probably against Tristan Boyer this year. After lucky losing into Del Rey, I'd lucky losered. I won my main draw match against him. I'd served for the match in the second, didn't get it. He served for the match. I broke him, ended up winning in a third set breaker in an absolute physical match. And I think from there on, I've won a lot of 3-set matches this year. And that was one where I really was like, man, I can be really physical and I can be fine to play the next day. And I think that was a really big mental victory for me, was being able to know that the work I'm doing is getting me into a spot where I can win physical ATP matches against it doesn't matter who. So
very good. You have played 3 of the biggest stars in the game in terms of youngsters coming through, in Carlos Alcaraz, Mensik, and Fonseca. Which was the toughest opponent?
Man, that's a really tough question. I think going on court with Carlos was the hardest, because I felt like there was just such an aura about going on court with him. It was just like stepping on court, you could just feel his presence. So I'm going to say that was the hardest thing about playing him. The going on court against Fonseca was, in the match, it was the hardest tactically, because I knew that, both of us had practiced with each other in Cary just before US Open last year. And we had maybe one of the best practices I've ever had in my life. And both of us were absolutely just taking forehand line rips, just like absolutely pumping forehands, both of us, like just an insanely high level practice. And then when we stepped on court to play our match, I don't know, I need to ask him honestly what he thought, but I felt like both of us were overplaying to the max, because we were so mentally thinking about the other guy's forehand that we could not make balls, because we were just like thinking about the other guy's forehand. And so we were taking, horrible decisions because we didn't want to let the other guy settle and find a forehand to change on. So I think that was the hardest thing about that matchup, was we were both just making horrible decisions, taking balls line, missing them. There wasn't a lot of rhythm. Both of us were serving well, so there wasn't a lot of points, but when we got them, we were just making terrible decisions. And then going on court with Mensick, I was thinking like, man, I know his serve is like ridiculous. And so I felt like against him, I felt like I actually could be hurt the most with, not being able to get in points. His serve his serve is one of the best serves that I've faced in an ATP match. He's hitting first serves at 140 and that are bouncing at my shoulders, or he's hitting kick serves that are extremely heavy. So I think that was the hardest thing about playing him.
You should be a politician. That's a good answer. Roger or Rafa?
I'm gonna say Roger because I'm very good friends with Tony Godsick and Nico Godsick. Obviously, Nico was my doubles partner through juniors and through a few ATP matches as well. Actually, I was able to FaceTime Roger when I won Orange Bowl with Nico.
Oh, wow.
I've never actually been able to speak to Nadal, so I'm going to say Roger just because, it's actually a funny story. In that FaceTime, he told me that one of the only, I don't know, it was like one of the only Orange Bowls that he didn't win was 16s doubles. And so I had that over Roger. So that was, I'll take it, So that's my answer there.
If you could steal one shot from another player and add it to your game, who would it be and why?
Another player's shot. You know what? I'm gonna take Roger's slice because I've been having an absolute. I mean, after playing, actually, you know what? No, I'm gonna change my answer. Give me Moutette's underhand serve. Give me his underhand serve because I did not win a single point with his underhand serve when I played him.
How many did he do?
I think he went 5 or 6, and it was next level. It was unbelievable.
Did you see it coming? Could you feel it?
No, couldn't feel it. Couldn't see it. Just second serve, first serve, everything. Couldn't get there. Just drop shot winner.
So he was hitting aces.
Aces. I think he aced me twice with underhand serves.
That's incredible. I need to go back and watch that video.
I don't know if you'll be able to find it. It's qualities of an ATP. You'll never be able to see it.
That's maybe good for you. I mean, this guy. Exactly. I mean, that guy is so skillful.
Oh my! His hands are the best in the world, I'd say.
I don't know what they put in the water in France, but these Frenchies come out. Medical timeout or not?
Yes, I think that you should be allowed to take a medical timeout, but I think you should have to face a point penalty if you do take it. I think that college does it the right way with that, because sometimes I think medical timeouts are taken in order to, offset the tempo of the match maybe a little bit. Maybe the guy's, serving for the match in the third set and, a guy takes it just to maybe, ice him a little bit. You see it in like football where coaches call a timeout when he's about to hit the game-winning kick. So, I think there should be a point penalty involved.
I love that. Do you know what? No one's ever said that. I've asked that question 253 times. And no one's ever answered that, but I also didn't realize college did that.
Yeah. I think it's smart. Happen. I like it. I never took one in college because I didn't want to lose a point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a great trade-off. Then you genuinely would only take one. A point's a big deal,
if
right?
You have to, yeah. Especially if someone's serving out the match and you take one, like, all right, now I'm down low 15. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
No chance I'll break.
I think it should have to be on your serve, maybe. As well.
Yeah.
Because people would maybe play the game of taking it in.
Yeah.
Anyway, I like it. What's one rule change that you would have in tennis? And it can't be that one.
Damn. Gosh, one rule change that I would have, maybe eliminate the 5-minute warm-up. Because I feel like a lot of times every single player has, all right, they've already hit for 30 minutes at least the day before, or that day. Maybe they even hit twice if they had a night match where they've hit in the morning and then again in the afternoon. Then, they do their whole physio session for however long to get the body ready. And then they go do their gym, they ride the bike, they do extra mobility, they do exercises. Everyone's ready to go. The only people that are not ready to go are like the people that are 5 minutes late to the match because they know that there's a 5-minute warm-up. So I think that eliminating the 5-minute warm-up would be, it's not necessary. College doesn't do it. You just go out there, start playing. Obviously, for me, playing against Carlos in that stadium, I definitely needed that 5-minute warm-up. But, I think if you're just thrown to the wolves, then you got to figure it out.
Very good. And who should our next guest be on Control the Controllables? Now, there's a bit of a responsibility here. There's a passing of the baton. Tommy Paul sounds like a good one, a
Tommy,
bit
what
like
my question? Wait, who did someone say my name? Has someone given mine or?
nobody has, but we
Damn,
we we just wanted
bummer.
you. We just no, this is even better. We just
Yeah,
wanted you.
yeah, that's even.
That's like, we've seen you coming, we've seen you coming, and we wanted it, and what a good decision that was of us. So no.
I think a good one for you guys is also an up and coming American that has a very interesting story himself is Colton Smith. Very interesting story with just how he's come up playing tennis. Also a very good fisherman, hunter, whatever it takes to be a survivalist, I guess you could say. He's got it dialed. So I think that'd be an interesting one just to hear his story.
Well, we will be in touch to see if you can help us with that.
Sounds good.
And
Sounds good.
and I would imagine once my team find out about your link with Tommy Paul, they might be in touch with you about Tommy as well. But
Yeah, yeah.
our last thing that we haven't talked about, where we talked about it at breakfast in Barcelona, but the LSU Georgia, the
Yeah.
SEC. I have to ask you, who's your most hated team in US college? You only had 1 year. So I did 4.5 years, and I had so many universities that got right up my nose to the point that I can't even look at some colors anymore. And that's 25 years ago.
You know,
Georgia, what was your team that really got to you, that really you look out with college, or were you not there long enough?
so in the SEC, it was Tennessee.
Okay.
Just because that was my last loss in college. They were slimy. I didn't like Tennessee ever.
Orange. Ugh,
Yeah,
orange. Ugh.
just wasn't a fan of them. But in the grand scheme of NCAA, it's Ohio State. Just
Oh, right. Okay.
I watch them in football and I hate them. I watch them in basketball. I hate them. It doesn't matter the sport. I just don't like Ohio State. But they have a challenger there, so I've played it a few times.
So we can bond over our hatred of University of Tennessee.
Yes, exactly.
That's my number one.
Yeah,
that I
right.
can't bear that color, and that's what I also love about college tennis. Right, it's not a real hatred, of course not, but
Yeah.
it's this feeling of passion. And I'm 45 years old, and I still have those same feelings that I
Yeah.
had when I was 20 years old.
100%.
Ethan, you're an absolute star, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you in Rome. I will be getting there on Tuesday of next week, so I fully expect that you've had a couple of matches under your belt by that time. And
Awesome, yeah.
And all the very best for 2025. And thank you so much for your time and incredible insight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Look forward to the next time being on the show.
Thank you. And as I told you at the start, was I right? Did you love it as much as I thought you would? If not, then reach out and tell me. I don't know what I'm talking about. But if you did, reach out and let me know that I do know what I'm talking about. Please do get in touch and let us know how you're enjoying these episodes. This was a real standout for me. I just loved it. I found myself nodding my head as he spoke to so many of the pieces of information, and just the mindset. I'm so big on mindset. Like it's not an easy thing to have, but it's like once you learn different ways of putting yourself in the right mindset, it's so powerful. I loved it. Actually, he spoke so openly as well about some of the Americans that don't approach the clay court season in the right way, and it's so true, right? It really is. And it's not just the Americans with the clay court. You'll have various people from various nations. You almost get a bit, these tennis players. It's hard because they're traveling so much, but they lose their gratitude a little bit, and it becomes a little bit of a hassle almost. And it's like, oh, I'm going to be away for 6 weeks, and I'm going to be not going to have my home comforts for that period. And they do. You can kind of see it. You can see it in some of the results. You just don't see them. We obviously went through those stats at the start of the episode. There hasn't been a lot of success, but there's no reason why not, right? And I think it was so refreshing to hear Ethan talk about that and not be afraid. He wasn't being nasty, but not afraid to call some of them out as well. I've seen it with the Americans in Malaga the last couple of years at the Davis Cup as well, and it's like, come on, guys, you're representing your country, Davis Cup finals, but it's almost felt a bit like, get me out of here, get me out of here. I don't want to be around, and they've got to be they've got to be careful within the country because they've got so many players in the top 100 right now, and they're obviously doing fantastic things, but is someone going to step up and have what it takes to take the Grand Slam and take that kind of mantle to another level to follow? We haven't had it really. Obviously, Andy Roddick, but then Andre Agassi, Pete Sampras, Jim Courier. It's been really a long time since there's been someone that's been at that kind of extra elite level. On the men's side, obviously on the women's side, with Madison Keys winning an Australian Open, that's a different kettle of fish. And Jess Pegula with everything that she is achieving as well. But yeah, I thought that was just fascinating the way that Ethan spoke about that. And I'm really excited to watch this young man grow and watch his career. I'd love to speak to him again in a couple of years when he's a top 50 player and just see how that whole mindset is continuing. I also found it quite, just one last thing I'd love to touch on is college tennis, and he only played college tennis for 1 year. And people that know college tennis will know this, to go in as a freshman, just a 1 year young kid really, and to end up winning the NCAAs is incredible. But what I didn't realize, he said he had a 10-match losing streak within that year. Now, if you're losing 10 matches in a row at any level, you're struggling a bit for confidence, you would think. And then he said he went on and won 19 matches in a row afterwards. And I think that's quite fascinating as well, and he seems to have done that in his pro career as well. He lost his first 7 matches when he started playing pro, and then he seems to be unfazed with that. And that's someone to me that's clearly got quite a strong belief in himself, which is a bit more deep rooted, than confidence can be a little bit shallow and very much linked to our kind of recent past experiences, whereas belief is something a bit more innate. And this young man just gives that off to me, and it was a real pleasure to speak to him. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I do want to tell you a little bit about just our next episode, which will be out in a few days, and I think this one's a fascinating one as well. And I'm just going to kind of whet the appetite a little bit. Spanish tennis, known as the powerhouse for so many years. And when you start looking at the rankings, certainly on the men's side, there's significant drops. You go back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they always had 4, 5, 6 players in the top 30 in the world, sometimes 3 or 4 in the top 10. We've now got Carlos Alcaraz as the only player inside the top 25, and there's only 6, maybe 7 Carreno Busters holding on players inside the top 100 now, when it used to be 14, 15, 16. Carlos Alcaraz, I believe, is the only player under 25 as well within that top 100. So there's not as if, it doesn't feel like the players are coming through like they once did. And on the women's side, it's never been that strong. A few years ago, maybe there was 5 or 6 top 100. Now there's 3. And what's going on with Spanish tennis? And I'm speaking to a guy who has been an author of a couple of books that he's kind of really studied Spanish tennis, Chris Lewitt, and a fellow coach. And I think it's going to be a good conversation. Actually, it's going to be a good topic for us to look into. So just watch out for that one as well. That one will be coming to you really soon. And hope you are well wherever you are in the world. Thank you as ever for listening. Thank you as ever for your support. It's never, ever taken for granted. Big love from Control the Controllables. But until next time, I'm Dan Kiernan, and we are Control the Controllables.